Vishal, interestingly, this week I've spoken to one 88-year-old managing director of a company who's speaking on the quarterly results. And we all know Mr. R.C. Bhargav, who's been at Maruti Suzuki for the longest time. He's referred to some Japanese concept. Ikigai is one of them, right? How important is that? And finding that purpose? Because not everyone can find it. Let's face it, not everybody has that purpose in life. Not everyone's a politician. But not everybody has that golden purpose in life either.
Absolutely, and I think it's something that everyone who's retiring early or wanting to retire early really needs to think about. That is it financial freedom that they're seeking, or is it actually just having all the free time in the world? And I think these are two very different things. I think having all the free time in the world is actually very boring after a while from what we hear from other people. However,
you would have no idea about that.
We would have no idea about that as of now, at least. But I think it's very interesting to look at retirement in phases as well, right? So typically, people think about it as a bit of a continuum, like a 30-year, 40-year continuum. And obviously, as medical advancements happen, you probably are talking about 50, 60-year retirements as well. Typically, you sort of break it up into phases and say, okay, you have these, what we call the go-go years, where you're just happy to be out of work and having a lot more time. And then you go out and do everything that you didn't get the chance to do. Then you get to those slow-go years where, that excitement has become a little less. You've seen the world, you've done, you've attended every wedding, every engagement, every social function, etc. And you're like, now I'll be picky and choosy about where I go. And that lasts a reasonable period of time as well. And then you get to these no-go years where you don't want to go anywhere. You're just happy doing whatever you're doing. You're not trying to prove anything to anyone. You're sort of saying that, I'm sort of looking at how I can be my best in the last decade of my life,
energy.
Probably. That's right. Maybe. So typically what will end up happening is that as you go through these phases of retirement as well, there is a transition that automatically ends up happening very often with purpose, with health, with everything else automatically also. And you want to be able to manage all of that. So one of the things that does happen internationally with senior living, and some of it is coming to India as well, is looking at these phases also from the way senior living communities are put together. So you have these go-go years, which are very active, lots of people around you, you exercise, you do stuff which improves your health, eat healthy, all of that. Then you get to those slow-go years where you may need some assistance. So semi-assisted sort of living is there because not every faculty that you have may be working at its best. And you may need some assistance. And then you could end up into like fully assisted living. And each of these are important. And what tends to happen is the dependency on other people, including family, friends, well-wishers, etc., keeps increasing as you transition from one phase to another. So I think it's very important to think through the fact that, probably most people will go through all of these phases through their retirement. We deal with a lot of people who tell us, let's assume that I will pop it at 65. And we are like, you can't control this, right? I mean, you could be living at 90, and unfortunately you could have the last 15 years of your life which are not the way you wanted to see yourself or wanted to imagine yourself. So I think it's important to think about senior living from the life stage perspective as well, saying that, as I go through these phases, what's going to be the best way I can approach each of them?
That's very well put. And in fact, in financial planning, more than anything else, I think it's best to assume the worst when you're planning for something. In this case, living long is not necessarily the worst, but it's a good idea to have that benchmark. I guess in that sense, you're assuming that you will need far more than you might originally have penciled in for your retirement corpus or kitty.
Disclaimers: investment in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.